Sorry. So we'll send a link around as soon as that is all, as soon as that's all ready to go. But welcome. What we're going to do is just have a quick chat through what we're going to be going through today. So yes, hello and welcome from wherever you are dialing in from. This is the first of what are going to be quite a few training webinars that we host from Clevertouch. We are a MarTech specialist consultancy. We're based out of Winchester in the UK, been around since 2009. And essentially what we are here to do, what we're trying to do, is to help you all make sense of your MarTech platforms. So obviously we're talking about Marketo today, but kind of where we sort of play is just specifically talking about MarTech. We live, we breathe it, and yeah, we know it's complex, and we know everybody has different requirements, different ways of using it. But that's why we wanted to talk to you today about Marketo's latest feature on it, because hopefully a lot of you have maybe already used it before, used it already since it came out. But yeah, we're going to take a closer look about some useful and some cool bits to do with it. From a Marketo perspective, we were Marketo's International Partner of the Year. We were the first one to be that. We're also the first platinum partner in EMEA. And yet at Clevertouch, we've also got over 40 certified Marketo specialists, which is essentially what I help sort of look after. So I'm Chris, so I'm the head of training here at Clevertouch. And it's not just me here today. I'm also joined by my colleague Alex, who's our head of delivery. How's it going? You all right?
Yeah, all good. So it's first webinar, so it's always interesting.
It'd be great. It'd be great. So that's us. So let's talk about what we're going to go through. We're going to talk about, as I mentioned earlier, we're going to talk about Marketo's latest feature, so the engagement map, launched around the sort of the 1st of August, a little bit earlier for some of you. But we think it's a really interesting piece because this is one of the first, one of the most recent real big sort of visual upgrades to Marketo. And we think it's going to be a really interesting way to begin to visualize the way that we go ahead and we build our campaign, we build our smart campaigns and programs in the future. So we're going to talk about some things like use cases, some things that we've done working with clients, some example programs where you will find hopefully some tidbits and something useful to go ahead and take away, hopefully, into your own instances. We want to talk about some best practices as well. Again, our extensive tech team, we spend a lot of time in Marketo. So yeah, we've already learned a few things that we can already do. And hopefully for those of you that are in Marketo day to day, we'll be able to take these away and use as well. We're going to have a Q&A at the end. If you do have any questions that pop up over the course of the next sort of 15 minutes or so, 20 minutes, do feel free to drop them in the chat. There's a few of the Clevertouch team are in the chat as well. So some of those might be able to answer your question if we can't get round to it. Otherwise, we'll have some time for you all to jump off mute and ask us anything you like. Okay, either about engagement maps or anything else that we do at Clevertouch. Okay, so talk to me. Have you tried engagement map yet? You can just click on the thumbs up or the thumbs down. It'd be really good to get a kind of steer as to whether it's something people have tried before. Okay, bit of a mix. Some have, some haven't. Okay, no, that's really good. It's really interesting because sometimes we sort of think, okay, we're in the platform a lot. Your team are in the platform a lot. And we kind of assume that this is now something which is quite common knowledge, but actually, that's kind of why we wanted to do this today. So introduce you to it, talk a little bit about why you might find it useful, and then sort of talk about some of the caveats as well. So essentially, let me bring this down. What I'm going to do is just going to share my screen. Got a few open. That one there. So one of the biggest, and I guess, yeah, correct me, Alex, if I'm going wrong with this. I say one of the, especially where we work with lots of platforms. We work with Salesforce products, Pardot, Marketing Cloud, and Adobe Campaign and the likes of that. Where when you're building a journey, a customer journey or a campaign in your automation platform, it's usually quite a visual way you can go ahead and actually see how that works, essentially what my criteria is and then what happens through my journey, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I'm assuming I'm probably going to steal your thunder for the next bit. I was going to say one of the things we're missing or have missed up till now in Marketo is that visual aspect. Quite often in Marketo, we're given a flow, a diagram or something along those lines, and that's normally stage one is getting that flow into something that we can use in Marketo, something we can build in Marketo.
Yeah,
it's normally the hardest part as well.
But we see it, I think, when we have customers come across from a Pardot to a Marketo, for example, it becomes quite jarring. For those of you that have been in Marketo for a while, we're just used to this standard flow when we are creating a smart campaign where we define a criteria. We obviously do that through a smart list, through a combination of triggers, through a combination of filters, or a combination of both, right? And then we define what actually happens to them afterwards. Okay, but we always have to flip between the two to go, okay, this is who we're choosing between. This is our criteria, and this is then what happens to it. So it can make it quite jarring, and especially and I guess some of the limitations, I guess, of Marketo in that when it gets to this stage, advanced logic becomes tricky, right?
Yeah, I think especially when we're looking in smart lists and things like that, it can be that you have, in some cases, 10, 15, 20 different filters. We suddenly want to add in those ifs and ors and things like that, and that can become a little bit more difficult, especially because that little box at the top, things have gone off onto the right-hand side. And then, with the flows and things like that, we may have advanced logic. We are aware that if we start adding choices, we just get the one piece of logic that we can look at. So sometimes we have to what we class as daisy chain campaigns together, which again can start to become quite complex, can be quite challenging for someone that's not used to looking at this every day to kind of keep track of where they're going through processes and things like that. Yeah,
and I think exactly that, especially if you're not used to building these, and if you're new to Marketo especially, having to sort of flip between these can be difficult. A lot of you know this already. So engagement map is what Marketo have brought in now, and it's currently just available on smart campaigns. They're talking about putting it into actual programs later down the line, but this is phase one of this feature launch. In this example here, we've got a trigger, we've got a filter, and a flow step of send them an email, and then we change their program status. Okay, so that's all good. So on every single smart campaign now, you'll have this feature. You'll have this ability to switch between that traditional UI and this, which is your engagement map. So it looks like a canvas. It looks like a nice sort of what you would kind of classify as a traditional journey flow. So like I said, this is phase one of this. So there are a few limitations in here. But if you've had a play around in it already, you'll kind of notice that even just where you've got a relatively simple smart campaign, where you've got what we've got, a trigger, a filter, and a couple of flow steps, even just physically seeing it in this view is quite useful. Especially when there's things, for example, where you have triggers and filters in a smart campaign. This actually shows you what happens. The trigger is always what triggers the smart campaign, and the filters follow afterwards. Okay, so even if you weren't aware of how they interact with each other, I think that's quite a nice little step.
Definitely.
So like I said, there's a few limitations right now, but just from this view, this is obviously something simple. We'll go into some of the more advanced use cases in a sec. But what we can do from here is that we can very quickly look at things like our smart campaign settings. We get this really useful status here as well on the right-hand side. We can see how many people are sat in a wait step. So if you've got a smart campaign that's got a few of those wait steps, it does bundle them all into one, which is worth noting that we've found. So it won't say estimated 1,000 people are at wait step 1, 2. It won't do that. It'll just group them all together. But that's useful. You can do all of your qualification rule settings and changes here if you want to. And I can also activate my campaign from this view as well. Again, quite useful. If I did want to go in and edit any of this, so if you sort of start clicking around on some of these filters and triggers, you get this sidebar pop up, and that gives you more details of the filter and the logic that you're applying to each of the filters or the triggers. Okay, so it doesn't give you a lot of information actually in the view itself. You might need to click onto it and have a look at seeing what's actually happening. If I wanted to edit anything, And this is what Adobe have stressed as part of phase 1, is that if I do go into edit anything like my smart list, flow, or this trigger, if I just click on that, it does kick me back into the old UI for now. Adobe is saying what will happen in one of the next phases of releases is that you'll be able to add in your flows, add in your flow steps, your triggers and your filters into smart lists directly from this view. Okay, so much kind of what we imagine, what we picture like Pardot's Engagement Studio to look like, where you just get a little plus and you can just add stuff into it. So it doesn't do that yet, but that's what we're expecting it to do. So that's pretty cool. But like I say, that's just something quite simple. And yeah, we can actually see up here, it's quite clear what type of campaign it is, whether it's active, inactive. I can change the name of it, by the way, up here as well. Add a description. I hope you're all writing descriptions for your smart campaigns.
Of course.
I'm sure you, yes, always. Good. So yeah, what you've been doing, Alex, with a lot of our clients is, like you say, you were talking about those daisy chaining campaigns, haven't you? So,
yep.
So yeah, talk us through the next one that we've got.
So far we've looked at something that's relatively simple. You know, if you're looking at something like that, there's not a massive amount of difference that we're seeing essentially. But if we look at something slightly more complex, like this one that I've called linked, this is now a campaign. If we look at the smart list, we have two triggers. I haven't added any filters just yet. And then we have, when it loads, a bunch of different flows. So we can see here we've got more complex things that are happening. So we're now adding change values that have got, sorry, that's right. Okay. Oh, cool. That have got multiple steps in there. And we've also got things like request campaigns. So this is where, from what I've seen, the engagement studio or the engagement map really does start to come into its own. So we can see here, these are all of the sort of affiliated campaigns that are part of just these 3 flow steps. And essentially, this is built to look very similar to what we may see in a consent or compliance flow. So this is very similar to something that we have here at Clevertouch, and it's looking at a number of different stages. So we're looking at data cleanup, we're looking at adding in different privacy laws based on country, and then we're looking at our opt-in values and making sure that we are assigning specific values based off of the opt-in that is used or the opt-in that has been selected by the client. So when we go and have a look at this in the engagement map, we can now see a slightly different story. So we can now see that we have still quite a simple flow, but it's much easier to see the process that's happening. So we can see at the very top that we have 2 triggers. And when I look into those, it's going to show me both of those triggers and the fact that they are running essentially at the same time. Anyone that's used Marketo for a long time, we know that all triggers essentially happen at the same time and run as ORs. But this highlights this very quickly, that it is a case that either one of these can set off that smart campaign. Then we have our first request campaign. Again, this is something that was a really good way of highlighting how request campaigns actually work inside Marketo. So first and foremost, we can now see the fact that there is a correlation between our first campaign that we were in, our linked campaign, and then our second one that we've gone and requested here. So we can see that we are requesting a campaign. In this case, it is our data cleanup example. And when we go into this, we can see that actually both of these are going to happen for both audiences, and they're going to happen at the same time. So where we see this one finishing, we have a closed flow and a closed flow there. That's essentially where those 2 link. And we can see that what's actually happening is both of these are happening at exactly the same time. And in here, we can see, here are the choices. So based on what's happening, so we can see here, if the string value is changed to a value of true, we're going to change it to yes. If it's false, we're going to change it to no. And if it's empty, we're going to add in a null value there. One thing you may spot is we have these little exclamation marks, these orange exclamation marks that are popping up. And it's basically Marketo is giving us a warning saying, this isn't going to stop your flows from running. This isn't going to stop your smart campaigns and things like that. However, there is something that potentially may not be best practice. So we can see here that we have a choice which has no value that's added. So therefore it's going to be skipped. Now, anyone that's used to looking in the standard view for a smart campaign, When we look at flows with choices, when Marketo decides to load, it's just a case that we're saying, I only want these values to happen. So if there is no value that matches any of these, do nothing. And essentially skip it. That's absolutely fine. It is, it's not best practice. That sounds very odd to say.
Yep, I'm with you.
There's nothing wrong with doing it, but Marketo is saying that potentially there could be an issue, might be something to look into. So from our campaign, we'll just pop into that one quickly. We can see that that is all it's doing. So it's a campaign that is requested. And then inside it has one flow step, which is basically doing a bit of a data cleanup for us. So in this case, this data cleanup is meaning that if for any reason we had a list import that had come in where someone had added true rather than yes, rather than our campaign falling over and consent not running, we just have a cleanup stage. But the main thing is this is the first thing that we want to happen. Looking at this, that's absolutely fine. This is going to run. It's then going to get to the end of the close flow, and then things will happen afterwards. However, that's not quite what's happening because technically both of these are running at exactly the same time. 99% of the time, that's absolutely fine. However, we have some clients that have so many things that are happening. We have some clients that, when a record is created, we could have upwards of 100 various actions that take place. Things can get slow, things can happen in the wrong order or not in the way that we would expect. So what we can do, if I pop back into our linked one, we can change our request value or our request campaign from a request to an execute. So what I'm going to do is we're just going to go in and I'm going to delete that. And then rather than using my standard request campaign, I'm going to use my execute campaign. I'm not bothered about bringing any parent campaign tokens or anything like that. So we'll leave that as false. And we're going to pop in our value here. And we can see that we're going to run, not that one, it is called empty opt-in source.
Yeah, it's just there. There you go.
There we go. So we then have our empty opt-in source. So now what this is going to do is rather than running as a request, we're going to run it as an executable campaign. Executable campaigns, these run exactly when we tell it to, and the rest of the flow doesn't continue until that campaign is run. For most of us, we're fully aware of that, but this is where the engagement map is really helpful because what it will do is it will show us the main difference there.
We've not really been able to see this before.
No.
You try and compare the two. You're like, should it be a request? Should it be an execute?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So with this one, because in this campaign, this one at the top is going to change those values to yes and no. We actually need those values to be specific as yes and no for the final request campaign to actually take effect. So we need to make sure that all of that data cleanup is done before this one is ever called. So looking in here, we still have our triggers as we did before, but with our executable campaign, it is now following that campaign directly. So it is at this point, it's no longer running in, for anyone that does JavaScript, an asynchronous function. It's now running basically one after another. So we can see now we have our executable campaign is going to be requested. We then have our data flow and we can now, we're going to do that data cleanup. At that point, the campaign closes and we move on to our next thing. So in our next one is then going to be based on the country value that we have. We are then basically going to assign our privacy law. And then finally, we have our final request campaign where we're basically at that stage. I'll drag over for me. There we go. At that stage, we can then see that we've got lots of other campaigns that are going to go and take effect. So that's the first thing that I really like about this is the fact that we can really see that sort of the difference between request campaigns and executables. With those two, I would say I was probably about a year into using Marketo before I'd even considered what an executable campaign was.
Yep.
Because you get request campaign and you just use that forever. But it's one of those ones that if you don't know, this really does highlight the differences between the two. I like the fact in here as well, you can very quickly see. So if we jump into this one, I can very quickly see all of my options that are going to be selected. So this one, I think, has about 30 odd that it's going to, or I think it's about 26 that it looks through or something like that. So we can see those very easily. I can also see here that we've got 4 that are looking at country. And then my final one, actually, because it's CCPA, actually looks at a state rather than a country, which is quite handy. But this is where it becomes really handy, is up till now, I would have this campaign and I have to go into it, and then I can say, okay, this one has a request. Those 3 are requested. I then go and find those campaigns. And then it could be that these campaigns go and request other campaigns, which then lead into other things, into new lists and things like that. And it becomes very confusing on something very big, where the dotted lines are and the assets that are being used and that sort of thing. That's his Marketo being very helpful.
We got so far.
We nearly made it without getting a Marketo bug coming there. So, this is another one. And normally what I would have to do is do something like use by, and I can kind of go, right, okay, so that one links into my LinkedIn campaign and that sort of thing. However, in here, what we can do is I can actually just extend all of these, zoom out a little bit. I can start opening all of these up. If it's going to let me, there we go. And what we can do is we can start to get a really good picture of what an entire set of linked campaigns start to look like. So we can drill down into these. We can see over here, we've got a few more choices. And it may be that actually you don't need to see all of this, but I think quite often, if you've got someone that isn't used to looking at the Marketo UI and using all of the little sort of nuances and things like that to get around it quickly, this is a really, really handy feature. We can very quickly show someone what an entire campaign will look like from start to finish. What we can also do as well is we have an export button at the top. There's one thing, if I can ask Marketo to do it, is make an expand all, because unfortunately, if I export and I haven't expanded everything, it's only going to show me a PNG of the ones that I have.
Yes.
I don't know if that will ever become a thing, because when I was testing this, we did get it stuck in an infinite loop where things just open and open and open and open. So I think
we could break it.
We could break it. But if they could do that, that'd be fantastic. But as I said, we do have that export function. It will think about it for a little bit, and then it will just basically create a PNG for us. Now, on some of those, they do get very big very quickly.
Something like this, it will. Absolutely.
Yeah. But there we go. We now have our PNG, which is on the wrong screen. There we go.
We're sharing the window, so even that isn't showing.
Oh, never mind. We'll show it at the end. I'll pop it in the
Try it for yourselves. Yeah, we can just throw that straight.
But essentially, we have a really good PNG that we can then disseminate to other people. And it makes it a lot more visual, a lot easier for people to see, and basically just follow flows down.
Yeah, and that's what I really like about it, because imagine that you're trying to explain this to, your senior marketing managers, your CMO. You're trying to talk through this wonderful consent process that you've labored over, and you're having to click on anything up to like 20 different smart campaigns. Whereas now you can see it all in one view, which we think is really nice. So I guess, in terms of, there's a few, in terms of best practices to sort of talk about, there's, where we're talking about request and execute campaigns, we're not really talking, they're not common flow steps, are they? They're not necessarily, not going to be using them for absolutely everything. But in terms of like things to consider now that we've got this view, is there anything else you kind of suggest? Like when you're obviously trying to decide between whether you should request or execute, you can obviously now see the difference between the two. I guess just to jump in, actually, just the one thing I've kind of noticed, I guess, from this is that the way that Marketo is joining these up, this is the flow of how Marketo is flowing through the program. So kind of what I mean by that is that if you have, if even going back to our first example where we had filters, and if you have a subset of data that doesn't match your filter criteria, it doesn't create at the moment anyway, not sure if it will, it doesn't create this branch off with like an end or a remove from campaign. It doesn't create that. So the view you see here in engagement map is essentially Marketo's own flow throughout everything. And that's kind of where you see, like closed flow and it splits it out, or where we have default choices that don't actually do anything. They still connect in terms of the way Marketo is flowing through the program itself. So it's just something to keep in mind. But anything to start thinking about now that we've got this for you?
I think the main thing at the moment is it's one of those ones where go in and have a play. You know, it's one of the first things that we did as soon as we had access to it. We went in and we did what techies do, and we tried to break it.
Yep.
Creating infinite loops and things like that. But it's very good to start looking and drawing your own conclusions, in the sense that we looked at this and instantly we were thinking this is a much easier way to visualize big flows.
Yeah.
There are a few caveats. The fact that if you don't go into the top level, so in this case, we went into the linked campaign.
Yes.
If we went directly in at, say, our opt-in yes at a base level, it's not going to show me the campaigns that sit above it. So it won't show me necessarily the way that the flow would look above it.
Just starts with this, doesn't it?
Yes.
We can't see there what's triggered it as such.
No. But I can still go into my used by, and I can see where the campaign would subsequently be used. So that may be something that comes in later ones. I think it'd be quite hard for Marketo to do that because of the amount of assets that can use things. But yes, if you're going to look at a big set of campaigns that are all linked, I would always say start at the very top.
Nice. And I think certainly for those that are new to the platform, exactly as Alex said, in terms of like just playing with it, like build out a campaign and click on engagement map, which is free to everybody, by the way. If you have access to Marketo, you can see this. And engagement maps are available on all of your old smart campaigns.
Yep.
So everything is completely backwards compatible is probably the wrong word.
They've backfilled everything.
Yeah, exactly. Retrospective application.
Go there.
Any other terms? Excuse me. So yeah, we think this is just phase one, as Adobe have said themselves. So we think this is only going to grow. This is only going to ease and improve the way that you can build your smart campaigns, rather than just looking at this sort of linear list of individual steps. Hopefully that's something you found useful. Hopefully there's anything you've learned from it, whether it's even just going back and looking at seeing how old campaigns work. I think for testing, actually, it's really useful.
It's very handy. As I said, we've built some very big campaigns. You know, this works really well from a testing point of view. It definitely works from seeing where you think potentially there could be flaws, and it's very good at highlighting where you've definitely made a mistake and an error. But yeah, things like, you know, consent and compliance, if you're doing lead scoring, lead management, if we're doing data governance, all of those, you know, thrilling topics, they can get very, very complex and very big very quickly. So this becomes a really good tool for kind of cutting through the weeds.
Nice. Cool. Conscious of time. But yeah, hopefully that's something you've all found really useful. Go in and have a play. Go in and check out some of your old campaigns, see how they flow, and have a play with some request and execute campaigns, and kind of see just like the differences between them and how they might impact your platform as a whole. So yeah, kind of happy to open it out. Obviously, just in the interest of time, we're happy to stick around for a few minutes or so. If you do have a question, there isn't anything in the chat at the moment, but if you wanted to, you have a queue function on the left. So if you wanted to, you can just hover over it, ask a question, and then we can get you off mute. And yeah, you feel free to ask us anything. Thanks, Debbie. Appreciate it. Thanks for joining. Hope you found it useful. No problem. Thanks, Jason. No, thanks for coming. Thanks, Mark. So yeah, if we're not, if any do come through, like I say, we'll stick around for a little bit. But otherwise, thank you all for joining. I say, if you do, feel free to get in touch. We do. I head up training here. We do all kinds of different bespoke, tailored courses for, I say, not just Marketo, but other platforms as well. But for Marketo, we have dedicated courses to get people up to speed on the platform quickly. We can get somebody our new Marketo Complete course. We are encouraging anybody who's brand new to Marketo and wants to get campaign ready in as little as 3 days to go on our website, check out that, or just drop us a note. Our email address is there. So training@clever-touch.com. So yeah, drop us a note. Really looking forward to carrying on the conversation with you all. Cool. Question from Jan. So to me, the engagement map is very focused to executable campaigns. Does a system developed on batch and trigger can take advantage of it? Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think it can. It's one of those ones that, with smart campaigns, there are hundreds, thousands of different applications, different ways that we can use them. Like I said just the other day.
No one saw.
It's fine. So with those, I think at the moment, it is very focused because of the way that it connects things. It's very focused at looking at how sort of campaigns can connect and things like that. I think hopefully we'll see things coming in with sort of subsequent phases that will definitely make it more useful for looking at, a little bit like we see in part of the engagement studio, which route people have come in by.
Yes.
So we can see, okay, if we have 3 triggers, how many of those came in because filled out form rather than click link in email. So if that kind of thing comes in, I think it's going to just add another layer of sort of reviewing that we can do. It may be that, this campaign's been alive for 6 months, and in those 6 months, no one has come through because of that particular form fill. Okay, well, maybe is that the right trigger that we need? Do we need to change that and adapt and things like that? So hopefully, if we're seeing those kind of things coming through in the future, I think it will become a much different sort of tool that we can use. But I think at the moment, it's a very visual element that does lend itself to kind of those connected campaigns.
Cool. Thanks, Jan. Thanks for the question. I hope that helped. Cool. Any more? Otherwise, we will let you enjoy the rest of your Thursday wherever you are. Just had to check it is Thursday.
It is all day.
It is all day. Okay. Yeah, if you did have any other questions, drop us a note. Otherwise, thanks again for joining, and we'll see you on the next one. Thanks a lot.